Clean the office, that's all you're good for. Doug Trent didn't even look up from his phone when he said it, just strolled past with that cocky, underbaked swagger you only get from a man who thinks khakis are business formal, and that being born into a country club family makes you management material. The words didn't even register at first. I was kneeling by the AV cabinet, checking the HDMI ports under the table, when his voice hit me like dust from an old vent. Sudden, dry, irritating. I didn't say a word. Just stood up, slow and even, like I hadn't just been spoken to like the damn janitor. The kicker? I had helped clean this office before, years ago, before I helped rework our entire client lifecycle model, before I got my name on 3 internal patents, before the board looped me into every quarterly call under that stupid advisor label that let me be everywhere and nowhere all at once. Doug didn't know any of that. He saw me in flats, black slacks, a rolled-up blouse, and assumed. That's all he ever did. Assume and perform. As I gathered the last folder and laptop bag off the side table, I passed the actual cleaning closet. I remember pausing for half a breath, watching the door creak open from the air vent pressure, like it was offering me the punchline. Instead, I walked straight past it, right into the boardroom where 12 executives were waiting. And if you're already hooked, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe. Seriously, it helps more than you know. 97% of people listen without subscribing, and it's what keeps the team fueled up to bring you more stories like this. Now, back to the chaos. Sorry I'm late, I said. Shall we begin the quarterly review? The room went quiet. Not corporate, awkward quiet. Funereal. You could hear the buzzing from the wall thermostat. I watched one of the junior VPs from the parent company fidget with his Mont Blanc pen. CFO Hartley gave me the same nod she always did. Subtle, tight, approving. She was the only one who really understood why I was leading this presentation. Maybe 2 others in the room had pieced it together. The rest were about to get their education the hard way. Doug entered behind me like he'd just walked onto a golf course he wasn't invited to. I could hear his cheap cologne war with the HVAC system, some ungodly fusion of citrus, and I peaked in college. He paused when he saw me standing at the touchscreen, then leaned over to our equally clueless COO and muttered something. Probably another gem like, "Is she the catering manager?" The COO didn't respond. I tapped the screen and brought up the first slide. 12 months of performance data, mapped, tagged, and color-coded. Every red zone circled with a margin note, every green spike labeled with initials, some of them mine. We'll begin with Q1 variance from forecast, I said, using the pointer to highlight an ugly little cliff in February. Revenue dip was traced back to client churn after Pilot Path Delta was implemented. I let the words hang there. Doug squinted, confused. Wait, that's the Delta strategy I rolled out. No one looked at him, not even the interns. I kept going, like he hadn't said a damn thing. The initial intent of Delta was valid. Reduce onboarding time, improve first invoice velocity. But what we observed in live accounts was something different. Churn increased by 8.3%. Implementation friction increased. Clients cited confusion and lack of live touchpoints. Net revenue impact, 1.2 MARs. The COO cleared his throat. Is this verified? I nodded. Backed by support logs, client exit surveys, and back-end telemetry from the client dashboard. Doug took a seat without asking. I could feel it, the slow sinking in the room, like someone had cracked a window in the middle of a snowstorm. My voice didn't rise. I didn't gloat. I just walked them through the numbers, one slide at a time, clean, precise, surgical. When I moved to the next section, projected recovery paths and resource relocation, I noticed CFO Hartley glance at me, then down at her folder. Inside was a sealed copy of the restructuring memo I helped draft 6 months ago. Doug had no idea what was coming. None of them did, really, but they would. The first thing you learn when you work in strategy, real strategy, not the kind that involves buzzwords and vague charts with upward arrows, is that silence tells you everything you need to know. And the silence in that boardroom as I pulled up slide number 3, it wasn't polite. It wasn't curious. It was sharp-edged and twitchy, like a room full of people slowly realizing they've been left out of something big. CFO Hartley had already shifted forward in her seat. Her pen tapped the corner of her folder once, paused, then tapped again. Signal received. The head of procurement looked like someone had just dropped a mystery charge on his personal credit card. A few eyes bounced between the screen, then to me, then back to their notes. And then there were the ones still holding on to their little smirks, the VPs who had mistaken me for a floor manager or maybe IT support, like my calm tone and unassuming outfit were some form of invisibility cloak. Doug strutted in around slide 5, carrying a paper cup of coffee like it was a badge of office. He stopped dead when he saw me presenting. Didn't take long for the confusion to bubble into arrogance. "That guy," he muttered to the COO, jerking his head toward me. He wasn't even subtle. I saw the whisper, the raised brow, the dismissive little scoff, as if the boardroom had glitched and let a janitor in. The COO didn't answer. His face had gone neutral. Not blank, strategically unreadable. I flipped to slide 6 and kept talking. The pilot program rollout under revenue enablement recorded a 23% variance in client engagement KPIs. Conversion timelines spiked. Pipeline consistency dropped. Clients were calling support before they even signed contracts. Doug cleared his throat. Are we looking at internal data here?" I met his eyes, flat, calm. Live telemetry, CRM data, cross-referenced with call logs and exit interviews. Every point here was vetted and verified through audit protocols Hartley's team approved. The room shifted. You could feel the chairs stiffen. One of the senior advisors scribbled something in the margin of his binder. I wasn't just quoting dashboard stats. I was pulling data from levels only a handful of people had access to. This wasn't public quarterly noise. This was the kind of analysis that required knowing which switch triggered what bleed, which team owned which friction point, and which executive had rubber-stamped the wrong initiative at the wrong time. Doug chuckled under his breath. "Seems a little excessive for Q1. Hartley didn't look up when she said it. "It's not excessive if it explains a $2.3 million loss trajectory." He shut up. I kept moving. Graphs, variances, remediation strategies. But I wasn't just pointing out errors. I was tracing them. Back to the budget meetings that got waved through without review. Back to the incentive structure Doug pushed without looping in ops. Back to the vendor contracts that ballooned our costs without guardrails. And though I never once said his name, every dotted line, every budget crater, every blind spot, all roads led to the same place. Doug tried again during the slide on resource allocations. "Where did these figures come from? Some of this doesn't match my deck from last week." I turned to him calmly. "Your deck included forecast projections. These are reconciled actuals. The difference is accountability." One of the board members exhaled, low and slow. Someone else coughed to cover a laugh. Doug opened his mouth, then seemed to realize no one was backing him. He leaned back in his chair and tried to pretend like he was following along. By the time I reached the final section of the report, recommendations and strategic adjustments, I had the room. Even the ones who had looked through me at the beginning were now leaned in, reading, listening, processing. But the best part? I didn't need to say much more. The numbers did the talking. And Doug finally stopped. Not just talking, but pretending. The smirk was gone. The casual posture replaced with a stiff lean forward, like he was trying to physically insert himself into relevance again. But it was too late. The room had already pivoted. To me. To the numbers, to the one person in the building who hadn't said a single unnecessary word, but had shown exactly where the cracks began. Doug had that salesman tone. You know the one. Half chuckle, half command. The kind of voice that thinks charm is a leadership quality and condescension is a communication style. He leaned forward just enough to be performative, flashing that fake aw shucks grin. "Okay, Elias," he said, waving a hand like he was wrapping up a TED Talk he hadn't been invited to. "Why don't we go ahead and wrap up the numbers so we can get to the real discussion?" I didn't flinch, didn't blink, just tapped the remote, flipping to the next slide. "Actually," I said, "that is the real discussion." No one moved. The air in the boardroom stopped breathing. CFO Hartley didn't even look up, just nodded once, eyes still scanning her copy of the report. And that one little nod might as well have been a guillotine rope snapping. Doug's smile twitched. He shifted in his seat, the performance fracturing at the edges. "Right, but I think what everyone here wants is to align on next steps, strategy, vision." He said vision like it was a product he was trying to sell at a 30% markup. I turned toward the screen. Slide 13. Let's look at margin leakage across departments. The chart bloomed up, 4 quadrants, highlighted zones, and a red spike that damn near stabbed the screen. Here we see a 17.4% cost swell in the last 6 weeks. Not tied to inflation, not tied to client-side delays. It originates from internal friction, misrouted approvals, unscheduled vendor escalations, and bypassed review gates. The room shifted again. Nobody looked at Doug, but they all felt him. I clicked into the breakdown, section by section, explaining the bleed. It wasn't just the money, it was the process, or lack thereof. Approvals greenlit without documentation. Consultants hired with no cap. Cross-departmental efforts spun up like side hustles without a single audit trail. Then came the final slide in that sequence, just one line across the top. Authorization path, Douglas Trent. Strategic initiatives pilot, approved 3x without controls. Silence. Dead, surgical silence. Doug made a sound somewhere between a scoff and a cough. Okay, hold on. Those were initial test deployments. I thought we were aligned on agile flexibility. I let him keep talking. I didn't cut him off. I didn't correct him. I didn't need to. Every time he opened his mouth, he stepped deeper into the quicksand. This was, like $10,000, maybe $12,000 total, he said, voice pitching up. Hartley finally looked up. Try 283,000. Vendor invoices are included in the appendix. Doug froze. A tiny vein started pulsing just under his temple. That can't be right. The COO cleared his throat, but said nothing. I advanced the slides, slow and calm, each click another nail in the polished veneer Doug had walked in with. Graphs, signatures, budget traces, all there. Moving on, I said, like we hadn't just opened the floor and dropped him through it. Client confidence metrics have also been impacted. Specifically, 3 renewals flagged confusion about strategy cohesion. All 3 accounts interacted with pilot path delta. Doug leaned back. That was a group effort. No one else signed off, I said. I didn't say it loudly, didn't need to. The CFO from the parent company, Ms. Evelyn Grant, who had been mostly silent until now, folded her arms and fixed Doug with a look I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Mr. Trent, could you send us a detailed summary of your approval logic for these vendor authorizations before close of business today? Doug opened his mouth, then shut it. He looked to the COO for help. The man looked back down at his notepad. Nobody was coming to rescue him. And me, I just kept going. Final recommendations, tiered rollback strategy, realignment options. I could have been talking about office chairs for all the emotion I showed. That's the thing about numbers. They don't argue. They just sit there, naked and factual, while egos burst into flames trying to outrun them. Doug didn't interrupt again. He didn't even pretend to take notes. He just sat there, small in his big chair, shrinking by the minute. By the end of the meeting, I didn't even look at him when I said, "Thanks, everyone. Full deck will be available in the secure folder by noon. Let me know if you need clarification on any line item." As people filed out, he stayed seated, probably hoping someone, anyone, would pat his back or whisper something reassuring. No one did. Let him keep talking. It only made the truth louder. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in corporate panic, performed exclusively by Doug Trent, director of nothing that mattered. It started with the Slack messages, dozens of them. "Hey, quick question. Mind clarifying something from yesterday? Just want to align on reporting channels moving forward." He CC'd people who hadn't been in the room, tagged senior managers like he was trying to crowdsource authority, scheduled 2 back-to-back Zoom meetings with vague titles like Revenue Strategy Sync and Post-Q1 Debrief clarifying accountability. I didn't decline. I didn't accept. I didn't show. In the office, he started walking faster, louder shoes, more dramatic sighs. You could hear his presence before you saw him. I passed him in the hallway once and he stopped mid-step, like he expected me to explain myself. I just nodded. Not dismissive, just polite, like he was a background actor passing through a scene I was already done filming. Doug called HR that afternoon. Apparently, he asked if I was even allowed to present financial variances at that level. Said something about role clarity and protocol. He tried to sound helpful, according to the HR lead I'd known for years, like he was trying to get ahead of a misalignment. HR told him the truth. I had dual access, strategic oversight and technical analyst credentials reinstated under a board-level restructuring memo 6 months ago. Cleared, documented, irrevocable. Doug didn't like that answer. He asked to see the memo. HR said no. Board sealed. You could practically hear the ceramic plates of his ego cracking. By the second day, Doug wasn't whispering anymore. He was cornering people in hallways, latching onto conversations with that wild, just checking energy, asking what my deal was, whether I'd always had that kind of access, whether I reported to the COO or someone higher. One guy from operations said Doug asked him if I'd ever worked in janitorial, like the story in his head was now built on some personal revenge fantasy where the broom guy was staging a corporate coup. Meanwhile, I kept working. Didn't change a thing. Same coffee mug, same login schedule, same seat by the window in the corner of floor 9. I sent no all-staff emails. I held no meetings. But I submitted 2 reports, on time, formatted, clean, and damning in their own quiet way. One was the follow-up to the Q1 variance deck, updated with vendor payment deltas and renewal fallout projections. The other? A simple one-pager titled Access Control Clarification, Strategic Alignment Roles. Just 3 bullet points. Referenced the restructuring memo by number. Not even attached, just cited. 1 copy to the board, 1 to Hartley, 1 to internal compliance. Doug didn't see it, but he felt it. By late afternoon, I noticed he'd stopped calling me by name. I was now he or that guy. He was trying to reframe the narrative. Paint me as some rogue internal consultant who'd somehow wandered into executive territory. But the more he pushed, the less anyone responded. Slack threads stopped pinging. People started replying to his messages hours later, or not at all. One director even messaged me directly. Just confirming you're the lead on the Delta rollback and renewal pivot, right? I answered with a thumbs up. Doug got tagged in the thread. He didn't reply. That night, I stayed late, not to gloat, not to spy, just to finish the next month's forecast sheet in peace. As I walked past the elevators, I saw Doug hunched in a breakout room, lights off, blue glow of his laptop, the only thing lighting his face. He was scrolling through an org chart, the old one. No wonder he was lost. The map in his hands didn't even have my name on it. It was a Friday when the old org chart surfaced. Someone, no one ever confessed, but we all had theories, dug it out from a buried company wiki and posted it in the Nart RevStrat Slack channel with the caption, just clarifying who's who for those of us confused after Q1. There it was. Doug's name in bold top tier of the revenue strategy org, directly under the COO. My name? Nowhere, not even in the footnotes. If you didn't know better, you'd think I'd never stepped foot in the building. That I was just a ghost, someone let borrow a badge for a day. And for a hot minute, it worked. Doug sprang back to life, like someone plugged his pride into a portable charger. He started replying again, fast and loud. Exactly. There's been some confusion this week, but this structure is accurate. He used words like the visibility and role clarity and legacy hierarchy. You could hear the desperation bleeding through the corporate jargon like mustard on a white shirt. People didn't say much at first. A few emojis, a couple awkward ahs and thanks for the share. But the tone? Off. It was that brittle politeness you get at funerals and bad second weddings. By noon, the COO weighed in, just 1 sentence. Please refer to the most current internal reporting structure when making decisions. That was the crack, the fracture, the moment the temperature shifted. At 12:47 p.m., I posted in the general channel. No intro, no flourish, just org chart has been updated, see link. The link was to the official internal HR hub, titled Denvik's Strategic Reporting Structure, Q1 Update, timestamped. Signed off by Hartley, verified by the board. My name sat 5 lines from the top. E. Ramirez, Strategic Operations Lead. Reports to CFO. Investment Committee Liaison. Doug's name was still there, lower, lateral, no longer bold. I logged off. Didn't stick around for the reactions, didn't open the thread again. I knew what would happen next. And it did. A slow exodus from Doug's Slack threads. People started archiving old channels he was active in. One of the senior analysts posted a spreadsheet in the strategy group chat and tagged me instead of Doug for final review. Someone else updated a project doc and changed Doug T to Elias R under lead approvals. And then there were the private messages. I didn't answer most of them. Didn't need to. One just said, "Holy shit, that memo." Another, "You were playing chess the whole time." No, I wasn't. I wasn't playing anything. I was doing the job no one wanted to admit needed doing. While Doug was shaking hands and playing manager dress-up, I was in the server logs, in the audit trails, in the margins of vendor contracts and renewal clauses and data flows that quietly decided whether we made profit or drowned in compliance debt. But sure, call it chess. Doug didn't say a word the rest of the day. No Slack messages, no meetings, no sudden quick syncs. Just silence. The kind you get when someone finally sees the chessboard they've been stumbling across wasn't a game, it was a map. And he wasn't on it anymore. The report didn't make a sound when it landed in inboxes. No announcement, no warning. Just a subject line in plain Helvetica. Operational friction and revenue leakage, Q1 observations. 36 pages, clean, neutral, razor sharp, no opinion, no speculation, just timelines, figures, audit trails, and receipts. Doug's fingerprints were everywhere, on contracts he hadn't read, approvals he'd bypassed, and vendor escalations that defied every internal control protocol we had. The first 5 pages outlined friction points, metrics no one could argue with, fulfillment delays, duplicated spend, client rework costs. Then came the fatal middle section. Pilot programs and strategy pivots launched without defined budget thresholds. And there, bolted like a gunshot, the approval of these decisions without budget guardrails suggests a misalignment with fiduciary duty. That sentence was the death blow. It wasn't emotional, it wasn't accusatory, but it was fatal in a way no insult ever could be, because it hit the one thing the board actually cared about: risk exposure. Within 90 minutes, an emergency session was called. Calendar invites went out with Investment Committee Closed Session as the title. Doug wasn't on the list. I was. I didn't respond. Just showed up. The meeting room was colder than usual, literal temperature and tone. CFO Hartley was at the head, flanked by 2 external advisors and Evelyn Grant from the parent company, who hadn't said more than 10 words since the Q1 review. Today, she didn't waste time. "We'd like your assessment of whether this constitutes isolated negligence or systemic misalignment," she said. No pleasantries, no easing in. I nodded once and opened my laptop. "No emotion," I said, "just patterns." Slide 1. Timeline of Doug's project initiations. Slide 2. Approval logs, everyone missing cost analysis. Slide 3. 3 client churns traced back to pilot confusion, each with over $200K in projected lifetime value lost. Slide 4. Vendor payout history, with a spike that lined up exactly with Doug's backdoor fast-tracking initiative. None of these breaches occurred due to malice, I added. They occurred because the process was disregarded in favor of speed. Hartley didn't blink. Speed without alignment is volatility. Yes, I said. And volatility at scale becomes liability. I stopped there, didn't drag it out. I didn't need to. The chart spoke louder than I ever could. Evelyn leaned back in her chair. "Has Mr. Trent seen this report?" "No," Hartley answered, "and I suggest we keep it that way, for now." The silence after that was dense. Then one of the external advisors leaned forward. "And who, in your opinion, should assume interim oversight for the affected departments?" 12 sets of eyes on me. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, just answered, plainly, "That decision should reflect alignment with both performance data and accountability history." Translation: I already am. They nodded. The session ended without a formal vote, but everyone knew the outcome. The absence of Doug's name said more than any motion could. I gathered my things, thanked the room, and walked out. In the hallway, Doug was pacing, phone in hand, red-faced and sweating under his tailored blazer. He looked up, expecting something, a reaction, a confrontation, maybe even a nod of solidarity. I gave him none of that, just walked past, quiet and measured. That report? It wasn't a knife, it was a mirror. And Doug was finally seeing his reflection, complete with dollar signs, broken systems, and a flashing "access denied" across the top. The boardroom looked different from the other side of the table. It wasn't the layout, it was the weight. The space felt quieter, thicker somehow, like the walls had learned to listen. A week had passed since the operational friction report detonated across every exec's inbox, and now I was seated at the head of the same table where Doug had tried to cut me off mid-slide. No projection screen this time. Just a folder in front of every chair and the kind of silence that only happens when everyone already knows what's coming. They're just waiting to see how loudly it'll land. Evelyn Grant was the one to break it. She opened her notes, didn't look up. "Before we begin," she said evenly, "any updates on the revenue enablement review?" I didn't shift in my chair, didn't clear my throat, just said, "The data speaks for itself." And it did. In every unchecked box, in every variance spike, in every client that listed confusion about strategy as the reason they'd walked. It spoke in the signatures missing from budget approvals, in the consultants hired without scopes, in the silence of Slack threads that no longer included Doug Trent. Outside the boardroom, a quiet knock came on the glass wall. A junior compliance manager entered and placed a single envelope on the table near Hartley. She slid it across the table to the COO, who barely looked at it before passing it off to his assistant, who then disappeared down the hallway without a word. Doug never made it into the room. He was standing 2 doors down in the breakout lounge, waiting with his arms crossed like a man still convinced he'd be invited in. When the envelope reached him, hand delivered, he took it like it might contain a second chance. The expression on his face when he opened it, I wouldn't call it shock. Doug didn't believe in consequences, only in misunderstandings. But that moment, that flicker in his jaw, the stiff swallow, the sudden absence of words, that was the first time I'd seen him process reality. Termination for cause. It was cold, unceremonious, and board-sealed. No soft language. No gentle wind down. Just facts, timestamps, citations. By the book. My book. Back inside the boardroom, Evelyn moved on without pause. "Let's turn to client retention forecasts. Elias?" I opened the folder, laid out the revised projections, and spoke in the same calm tone I always had. No spike in energy, no shift in posture, just another line item in a day full of them. The only difference? This time, no one interrupted. No one glanced sideways. No one asked me to wrap it up. Across the table, I caught Hartley's eye. She gave a single nod. I nodded back. No celebration, no applause, just motion, just precision. Doug's office was cleared out by end of day, his name stripped from internal portals by the following morning. The Slack channels he once dominated now quietly archived or reassigned. No statement was issued. No announcement made. The company didn't even send a goodbye email. It didn't need to. He'd made enough noise on the way in, and I'd made enough clarity on the way out. By Monday morning, Doug's office was empty. Not just cleared, erased. His nameplate was gone. Desk wiped, drawers open, chair reset like no one had ever sat there. The lights inside were off. Even the screensaver on his monitor had defaulted to the company logo, looping slowly like a silent verdict. His Slack profile vanished sometime overnight. No goodbye message, no archive. Just a broken link and a missing face in the sidebar. The channels he used to flood with meaningless buzzwords. Synergy, pipeline velocity, brand lift. Were quiet now, or worse, productive. Messages had rerouted. Threads once started by Doug now trailed off like bad ideas caught mid-air and forgotten. People noticed. And not just the leadership. The same analysts who used to breeze past me without a nod suddenly made eye contact in the elevator. One even held the door open and said, "Morning, Elias." It landed awkwardly, like the first sentence of a new language. In the kitchen, a junior PM who once asked if I handled printer cartridges offered to grab me a coffee when she went downstairs. I declined. Politely. But the shift had happened. I didn't need to demand space anymore. It made itself. HR reached out on Tuesday. Standard protocol, they said. Now that your board role has been acknowledged internally, we'd like to reflect that in your system title for visibility. You're welcome to choose director, partner, head of ops, something that helps people understand your alignment. I paused. Then, it's not about visibility. It's about alignment. The HR manager smiled like she understood. But she didn't. Not really. It wasn't about titles. It was about infrastructure, about the invisible threads that actually kept this company running, while men like Doug played dress up with their LinkedIn headers. By Wednesday, the placard changed. Not bold, not flashy. Just brushed metal outside the door of the strategy office, E. Ramirez, strategic ops lead, no tagline, no buzzwords, just the facts. I didn't announce anything, didn't host a town hall or send a visibility memo, but word spread, and people adjusted. Project decks started landing in my inbox with "review when you can" subject lines. Slack threads I wasn't even tagged in ended with "Elias, thoughts." Even the COO, yes, the same man who let Doug prance around unchecked, forwarded me a vendor RFP with a single line note. "Can we do better than this?" I didn't reply. I just sent back a redlined version that cut 12% off the budget and solved 2 scope issues. People started knocking before entering. It wasn't respect. Not yet. It was awareness. The kind that only comes after silence has been broken and someone realizes the quiet one in the room knew more than they ever said. And me? I hadn't changed. Still wore the same simple slacks, same button down, same coffee cup with the cracked handle. But the room changed. The hallway changed. The air. No one asked me to clean the office anymore. 3 weeks later, I was walking the same corridor I'd walked 100 times before, carrying nothing but a slim laptop and a printed agenda sheet when I passed the old cleaning closet again. The door was ajar. Inside, a junior associate, nervous, maybe a year out of grad school, was wrestling with the same rickety presentation card I'd used the day Doug mistook me for the janitor. The left wheel still squeaked. The handle was now fully cracked, barely hanging on with a sad strip of duct tape and misplaced optimism. She muttered under her breath, struggling to keep her laptop from sliding off while trying to pull the thing forward. I stepped in without a word, steadied the top, and guided the wheel back into position with my foot like I'd done 100 times before. "Thanks," she said, startled, cheeks flushed. "Sorry, I didn't realize you were—" I didn't make her finish the sentence, just gave her a quiet nod and kept walking. No lectures, no reminders. The hallway curved left, and I took the long route on purpose, past the conference alcove, past the water cooler where Doug used to camp out like it was his second office, and finally, past the exact spot where he'd barked, "Clean the office, that's all you're good for," without so much as looking up. That corner used to hum with his voice. Now? Just light humming from the ventilation, quiet, empty, but not forgotten. The COO passed me on the way out of the elevator. His suit looked more rumpled than usual, his badge clipped a little lower. Fewer people said his name these days. His title had been adjusted, though no one used the word demoted out loud. He saw me, I saw him, and like a man retreating from something he didn't want to admit he'd lost, he broke eye contact before I had a chance to decide what to do with it. I didn't say a word, didn't need to. Upstairs, the boardroom was already open. 12 chairs, 1 screen. Sunlight slanting in across the polished table. I moved to the front, unpacked my laptop, and slid in the HDMI cord without even glancing up. My coffee was still warm. I liked being early. I loaded the deck, 1 slide, white background, centered text. Leadership isn't about title, it's about clarity and chaos. No charts, no metrics, just that. I took a breath, adjusted my sleeve cuffs, hit start presentation. The door opened behind me. I didn't look to see who entered first. Didn't need to. Because this time, they weren't walking in to see the janitor. They were walking in to follow the person who'd already cleaned up the mess, and never once raised his voice doing it.